We like to think that time heals old wounds. We tell ourselves that if we suffer under someone else's bad choices as a child, we'll naturally know better when it's our turn. We promise the universe, I will never do what they did to me. But psychology and ancient history tells a much darker story. Left on autopilot, your biology doesn't avoid the past, it replicates it. Welcome to MindLit Labs. I'm David Cook. Today, we are decoding a psychological glitch that has been fracturing families for at least 4,000 years. It's an automatic behavioral script that passes trauma down from generation to generation, entirely in the dark. And to see exactly how this trap is engineered, and more importantly, how you can actively break it in your own life, we have to look at the hidden architecture of one of history's most famous bloodlines. Nearly 4,000 years ago, an old patriarch sat in a tent and made a decision that would nearly destroy his family. His name was Jacob. And the tragedy of Jacob isn't that he made a mistake. It's that he was completely blind to the fact that he was running a corrupted family script that was over a century old. To understand why Jacob did what he did, you have to look at his family tree. There was a quiet, hereditary disease passing down through his bloodline, and it wasn't biological. It was behavioral. It started with his grandfather, Abraham. The Genesis account shows us that as Abraham and his wife became very old, he began to lose faith in the promise God had given him about having an heir. Sarah insisted that Abraham take her servant Hagar and father a child with her. As a result, Ishmael was born. Now, Abraham deeply loved Ishmael. However, as the years went by, Sarah became uncomfortable with Hagar and her son living among them. So Sarah went to Abraham and demanded that Ishmael and his mother be sent away. It broke Abraham's heart, and he grieved bitterly. But God stepped in with a sovereign directive. Listen to your wife, because the covenant promise must flow through Isaac. But let's take a closer look at the psychological damage of that moment. What did young Isaac actually see through his child's eyes? He saw his older brother banished into the wilderness. He saw himself suddenly become the solitary recipient of all the tribal wealth, protection, and parental attention. In a child's developing mind, that massive structural imbalance looks and feels exactly like favoritism. And that seed was planted deep in Isaac's subconscious. And decades later, when Isaac became a father to twin boys, that unexamined seed bore bitter fruit. Isaac's default thinking replicated the exact dynamic of his childhood. He openly favored his rugged son Esau, while his wife Rebekah favored Jacob. That favoritism tore the home apart. Jacob literally had to steal his brother's birthright through deception, flee for his life, and spend years in exile because his parents played favorites. He knew firsthand the absolute agony of a broken, competitive family dynamic because he lived it. Now fast forward to Genesis 37. Jacob is now an old father himself. He has 12 sons from 4 different women. He has a perfect chance to rewrite the code, to build a home where every child feels secure under the promise of God. Instead, he walks into a market, buys the most expensive royal multicolored fabric he can find, and weaves a coat. A coat meant for only one child, 17-year-old Joseph. Why? Well, the Genesis narrative gives us the exact devastating reason. It says, "Now Israel," that's Jacob's new name, "loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age." Joseph was the firstborn of Rachel, the wife Jacob had truly chosen and fiercely loved, the one who had recently died giving birth to Benjamin. Jacob didn't wait for tragedy to play favorites. He used Joseph as an emotional shield against his own deep grief, completely oblivious to the fact that by elevating Rachel's firstborn above the rest, he was building a monument to the very monster of sibling rivalry that had ruined his own youth. Genesis 37:4 states the immediate psychological fallout. "And when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him." Communication broke down completely. Jacob was running an automatic script, engineering a psychological, spiritual pressure cooker in his own household. And what is the most dangerous part of an unbroken generational cycle? The children absorb the dysfunction and think it's normal. Joseph wasn't born arrogant. He was molded by his father's blind spot. At 17, Joseph is completely devoid of situational awareness. Genesis records him bringing an evil report about his brothers to his father. And true or not, this did nothing but fan the flames of resentment. Next thing we know, Joseph is walking around the tent wearing a royal robe. Then came the dreams. Joseph dreams of sheaves of wheat bowing down to his sheaf, and later the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowing down to him. Now Joseph wasn't wrong about the dreams. They were genuinely from God. But his communication was completely distorted by his environment. At 17, he simply didn't possess the necessary humility or discernment. Instead, he repeated the revelation to the very brothers who already loathed him. His arrogance wasn't just a personality flaw. It was the direct symptom of Jacob's unlearned lesson. And because Jacob couldn't see his own blind spot, his family fractured in the exact same way his father's house did. His sons conspired against the dreamer, stripped him of that beautiful coat, threw him into a pit, and eventually sold him to Mennonite traders for 20 pieces of silver. They dipped his coat in goat's blood and handed it back to an old man who is left to weep over the disaster he unknowingly created. This is where psychology meets the staggering sovereignty of God. Jacob failed the test. He couldn't break the cycle in his own power, so the cycle broke his home. From a human perspective, the story ends here, in blood, lies, and a slave caravan bound for Egypt. But textually, we see something profound. God doesn't abandon the line of Abraham because of their psychological brokenness. Instead, God takes the very wreckage of Jacob's unlearned lesson and uses it as the raw material for a macro-level rescue plan. Joseph had to be stripped of the coat of favoritism so he could eventually be clothed in the robes of an Egyptian ruler. He had to be separated from the toxic family script so he could be broken, remade, and positioned to save them all. Now, Jacob's story isn't just ancient history. It's a mirror. Every single one of us inherit a behavioral blueprint. Your parents handed you an emotional currency. Maybe it was performance. Maybe it was silence. Perhaps it was status or even favoritism. And right now, on autopilot, you might be using that exact same currency in your leadership, your marriage, or with your own kids, entirely blind to the friction it is causing. If you want to break the cycle, you have to do what Jacob failed to do. You have to audit the script. Run this two-step audit this week. Identify the inherited currency. What was the unspoken role, the trauma, or the coping mechanism of your childhood home? Then locate the replicant behavior. Where are you blindly running the exact same script today to protect yourself or comfort your own unhealed grief? Jacob didn't break the code, so the code sent his favorite son into a slave caravan. But as we will see, the pit was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of the cure. In the next video, we're going to look at the bottom of that pit to the entrance of a palace and look at the exact behavioral and spiritual shifts Joseph had to make to survive the fallout of his father's unlearned lesson. I'll see you there, and always remember, stay aware, stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep your mind lit. Take care, and God bless.
Thanks for joining us today. Be sure to comment, like, subscribe, and follow MindLit Labs, where we explore the convergence of mind, meaning, and faith. Our goal is to help you to think deeper, live wiser, and stay grounded in what's true, good, and beautiful.